Okay,
All
thank
right.
you. So, hello everyone, depending on where you are. I'd first and foremost love to thank Dr. Eke. So, we've just had a keynote that should essentially rattle all of us because I think the question you should have in mind as we go through this panel is who is writing the story of AI and whose flourishing does it serve? So the stakes are very high now more than ever. And so in this session, we will examine how the insights Dr. Eke has just shared with us translate into lived experience, policy, and practice. So particularly in the places where AI is already here. So, for example, our clinics, our governance systems, the data that describes us. And so, before we start, just for means of introduction, my name is Crystal Isanda. I am a Kenyan AI governance strategist and youth foresight practitioner. And I'm also a published contributor to global conversations on technology, essentially responsible technology. And so I have had the privilege of amplifying African voices on AI and education globally. And I deeply believe that Africa is not merely a testing ground for other people's technology. And I think Dr. Eke has really stressed on this. We should be architecting our own future because we know what we deserve. And that is exactly why this conversation is very important to me personally. And I am honored to be moderating it alongside three very respected professionals. And before we start, the Living Digitally Well Africa Summit presented by Doing Healthy Africa in partnership with Wise Working Leadership convenes leaders across Africa and the diaspora in order to advance practical pathways for thriving in digital society. And track four, which is what we are about to embark on right now, is where we confront the question, can AI be a force for African flourishing, or will it deepen the very inequalities we are trying to heal? So as we proceed, please share your questions in the question Q&A box, and we will have 20 dedicated minutes for you to ask the speakers any questions that you may have. And so now I'm going to give my panelists, Valentine and Dr. Edmund, some time to just briefly tell us who they are, what drives the work they do, and one question about AI in Africa that keeps them up at night. So let's start with Dr. Edmund. Yes.
Hi, can everyone hear me? All right. Thank you very much, Crystal, for this warm introduction, and also thank you to the past speaker, Dr. Eke, for such an insightful philosophical engagement that we just had there. I'm Edmund Uga from the University of Johannesburg. I did my PhD in AI ethics and governance here at the University of Johannesburg. And I've published quite a lot around, or relatively a lot, around AI ethics and governance. I got interested in AI conversation when I was doing my master's. Then I was engaging with the concept of technological colonialism and defining it specifically to mean value colonialism through technology transfer. Ever since then, the question of technology and its impact within the African society has been something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially from a value perspective, value understanding of technological transfer, technological engagement, and all of that. And recently, I've been looking at issues around AI safety, especially within the context of Africa. I mean, that was actually a question that I actually wanted to ask Dr. Eke earlier on. And that is in terms of the misalignment between principles of AI safety and their real societal impact within the continent of Africa. So, for instance, when we are looking at the principles of autonomy, the principles of privacy, and all of that, and recently with the AI working plan by the AU, and Zimbabwe just released its AI strategy, and it's so focused on the governance issue that it focuses on is democratizing AI, but at the same time, there is a disconnect between what democratizing AI means and the Zimbabwean context, for instance. And so it just puts me in this thought-provoking space where I'm trying to look at the misalignment between the growth which we envisage that AI would bring and the context in which we're deploying this system. So those are the things that keep me awake at night.
Thank you. Now we can have Valentine tell us briefly about herself before we begin.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Crystal, and thank you to the organizers and the keynote speaker and Dr. Edmund for that insightful introduction. So my name is Valentine Kamau. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. Um, so over the last few years, I've been working within the health sector, and my education background is also in the health sciences. And just the past few years, I just became very interested in the health tech space and what is happening. And as I was just reading and just going down the rabbit hole, I felt that our African voices, and especially for these innovators who are working day and night to make these innovations that will improve our health system, are not being spotlighted enough. And so I thought, why not create a platform where they can come and tell their stories, the challenges they are facing, and even in that way also inspire the next generation of health tech innovators. So in that case, I have a podcast called AI Health Page Africa, where I talk to these health tech innovators who are using AI and other upcoming digital technologies to improve our health system in Africa. So that's about me. And what is keeping me up at night, especially now in the context of AI, there is as even the keynote speaker was really telling us about the interesting proverbs. What I have recently really been thinking about is one proverb, especially from Comoros. A whistle cannot call back a dog. Uh, a whistle cannot call back a dog that has left the leash. So AI is already here, the leash is gone. A few years ago, we were talking about AI is the next big thing. Now it is the thing. So now it has left the leash. So is there anything that we are doing that we will regret later? So it's already out there. People are innovating with it in health, in finance, in education systems. So I'm just thinking, so there's all this, the buzzword, the new buzzword is AI. So are there things that we are doing that we will regret 5 years later? So that's really connected to the discussion today about ethical AI. If we do not put in place these responsible AI principles, ethical AI, trustworthy I think we will regret something down the line. So it is our responsibility working with the different partners in these systems. We work together, put the leash so that further down the line, this will help us grow and not be something that will come back to bite us. So over to Crystal.
Okay, thank you very much for those very rich introductions. And now we can all agree that the people on this panel really deserve to be here, and they will offer us insights that we can carry along, not just today, but in everything that we continue to do. So I will now start with Dr. Edmund. So you have published directly on the question I'm going to ask. So when AI speaks the wrong language, and that is culturally, linguistically, and conceptually, what happens to the mental health diagnosis and prognosis in sub-Saharan Africa, and how serious do you think is the damage? Dr.
You're
Edmund,
muted.
I think you're muted. Yeah,
There we go.
yeah.
Thank you very much for that question. In 2024, when I was doing some research, looking at medical machine learning systems used within the medical space, especially for clinical diagnosis and the prognosis of medical conditions, I realized that currently these machine learning systems are designed not from, or are designed using the major languages which cut across different continents, especially English and the rest. And so I was engaging with a colleague of mine, and she was working within the parameters of mental health here in South Africa, and we were talking about the notion of Kutwala. So this condition, Kutwala, it is, I wouldn't say it's a mental health condition, but it is a condition within the Southern African region where when a person is being called by an ancestor to go practice some kind of traditional priestesses and priestly duties, when the person refuses to accept that call, the person would have some kind of disturbances. So, and these disturbances will come from things like psychosis, it would come from things like forgetfulness. So they will have all of these symptoms. So we were looking at that and we were engaging with that. And then we discovered that when it comes to schizophrenia, there are the same elements or the same diagnosis which you will get from a person that is going through Kutwala or Kutasa is the same from someone that has schizophrenia, for instance. So what's the word? The symptoms are the same. So when we now have deployment of AI systems or machine learning systems, especially now that we have quite a lot of mental health apps that are meant to diagnose mental health issues, when we have these devices or these systems that are being deployed from the global north that have no contextual understanding of the sub-Saharan African space, particularly the Southern African region, what then happens? We saw that there is a possibility, at least dwelling on a philosophical argument, that there is a possibility that we'll have things such as misdiagnosis. So that is a problem right there. And that problem affects the very central aspect of, especially now at our universities here in South Africa, where we are having a lot of mental health apps that are being deployed into the systems. And we're trying to relieve therapists, at least from the universities. We're trying to relieve them of their jobs and then giving the number of it then becomes very imperative that design has to come from the sub-Saharan African space, or at least the Southern African space, where they understand this perspective in terms of mental health, because it appears that everything is now a mental health condition, and there are solutions that are now provided through this technological solutionism that is now rampant everywhere. And I think that when AI now, and you could see that I think Chinansa, Dr. Chinansa has published a paper where she looked at languages, I think it was like some Kenyan languages that had so much relevance such that the AI system didn't understand those, some concepts from those languages. And my argument here is that if some of these conditions that we have within the sub-Saharan African space are very, very cultural, and technologies and language is an expression of culture, then it follows that since the technology does not understand the language, it means that the technology cannot express the culture of the place which it has been deployed to. And the problem with that is we're going to have issues of misdiagnosis within these spaces.
Okay, thank you for that. And just before we proceed to Valentine, maybe I can just ask a short follow-up question. So you said design has to come from the sub-Saharan space. So in situations where you've seen this actually not happen, do you think it becomes a form of epistemic violence? So where we have African patients' realities being systemically misread by systems that were never designed for them?
And I think there would be a lot of arguments that would be placed there in terms of really understanding if that is epistemic violence. First of all, is it intentional? Um, that's the first question that we want to have, in the sense that we must also understand that AI growth is also a market growth. It's business at the end of the day. It's about maximization of profits and all of that. So for those that are producing this technology and they're really, really creating that violence, I don't necessarily think so, unless they owe us the responsibility of doing that. I guess it has to then come from within, from us, from those of us that are in the continent. And those are the kinds of, we need to then figure out how we can design this system, because it almost looks like we're taking, of course, we understand historical injustices and all of that. But I say to friends that it feels like, as people in Africa, we like things. If we really, really like things, we don't want human clinicians anymore, or at least we're so excited when we hear that technology is taking over diagnosis. Like, I've seen students saying that they'll rather use an AI to diagnose their condition rather than go to the professionals that the university has provided. So in cases like that, would that necessarily be a thing of epistemic violence? I wouldn't say so, because I just think that we are at a point where we then have to start making the contribution towards ensuring that we create sustainability in terms of our design, and sustainability is designs that reflect us. We have to put in the money. I don't think, again, like I said, it's a market structure. I don't think someone from the global north would design something that would not yield profit anyways.
Thank you. Thank you for that contribution. Now I'd like to move to Valentine. And I'd like to know, we'd all like to know from your conversations across the continent, what does ethical AI in healthcare actually look like from an African perspective?
Thank you for that question, Crystal. It's timely, and over speaking with the different people, and even being in such summits, one of the things that comes up is this AI that is now being deployed in Africa, is it actually supporting the clinicians? Is it having a patient in mind? Is the patient at the center? And does it actually reflect our local realities? That has really been mentioned even by my speakers before. So what does this local reality look like in our different African settings? And note that Africa is not one homogeneous country. So my reality in Kenya is not the same as the reality of someone from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, from Nigeria, from Egypt. So is it actually taking into context? So for example, if it's about AIs, that AI systems that are used in diagnosis, and even these the mental health chatbots that are coming up. So are they actually speaking to us? So one of the most interesting things is that some innovators are actually now incorporating the natural language processing, and actually now even the AI you can talk to it, the chatbot, you can talk to it in Swahili. So that is something that is always a concern. The human always has to be in the loop. So this AI should not come to replace the clinician, the psychologist, psychiatrist. It should be an enabler. We should not really rely so much on these AI systems that now the doctor is seeming like they're also really depending on this AI. The human is always the final decision. So that's something that is really coming up in the ethical AI discussion. And as even we are progressing towards this, and even the different innovators, what they always talk about is that they really can't see the next step. You see, AI is still quite new, especially in the deployment and health tech. So actually, one of the people I was talking to was talking of an analogy of crossing the river by feeding the stone, different stones. So if you're crossing a river, you really can't see the stone ahead of you, but then can't let it stop you. So build your innovation ethically, responsibly, So just step on that stone, and then by the time you go to the next one, just make sure you are observing everything that is needed. You need the regulatory system that you need to make sure that are working for you. Then go to the next step, which deploying responsibly, making sure that the pilot is covering the targeted population and not already giving some sort of bias. So that is what I would say. Over
Right.
to you,
Thank
Crystal.
you for that. Thank you for that perspective from your interactions and actually sharing with us what, why the person, the patient is very important. So now I would like to move to Dr. Ake, and we talk about ethical AI as though it's a universal standard. But even from your keynote that you shared with us, we can clearly see that we are not yet there. But I'd like to ask from your experiences and all what you've shown us, you've written, you have spoken about it. So where are current governance frameworks actually working, and where do they break down the moment they touch African reality?
Okay, so maybe we need to step back a little bit to understand the governance framework for AI. I think we only have maybe one or two countries or regions of the world with effective and substantive AI uh, regulation, right? The EU went first, as they usually do. But in Africa or in most other countries, what they have is a general framework of how governance of AI should look like and not effective regulations, right? Um, and these are maybe underlined by the data protection regulations that they already have in the countries. Uh, and speaking to the EU AI Act, it was a massive effort to go for it in the face of objections from different actors, so many actors, including powerful countries of the world, because there's still this AI race. Everybody wants to get to where they want to get to AGI without regulations, without barriers. Um, is it working in the EU? If you ask an uh, an EU resident that is working on AI, they will tell you it's a big regulation that they still do not understand, right? Because it has so many provisions and it has so many directives, just like any other EU regulation. If you're familiar with the GDPR, it took so many years for so many institutions to actually get a grip of it, right? Um, Nobody knows yet whether it's going to work in uh, in Europe. Um, as an optimist myself, I believe it's the way to go because what we saw in the previous decades before the EU AI Act was all self-regulation and the talk of AI principles and AI ethical AI without anybody doing anything, right? And if you look at literature and practice, ethical principles are not enough to regulate AI. They are not enough to address the concerns that we have with AI. So the only way to go is regulation. The EU has done it. Is it effective yet? Again, nobody knows yet. But I'm an optimist, a governance optimist, and I believe it's going to work. Is the way to go. In terms of Africa, we're trying to play catch up now, right? Most African countries are developing what they're calling national AI strategy. I was part of the group that wrote the Nigerian national AI strategy for Nigeria. And from that experience, I can tell you, let me maybe piggyback on that and tell you a story. Now, we went there for about 4 days or 5 days to write the national AI strategy. Came out as a draft after a few months. And this was 2 years ago, and it's still a draft up to now, right? Um, so the motivation, the underlying motivation for writing these national strategies in Africa is something that we still do not know yet, because there are big tech companies involved in all of them. I don't know, Edmond, whether you were part of the Zimbabwean one, but my colleagues who were part of the Kenyan one also had the same experience because big tech companies are funding these efforts. You cannot fund a governance and effort to regulate a technology that you are developing because what you would do is to have provisions that actually pander to what your interests and all that, right? So how Africa is going to go or set themselves up in terms of regulation is something that we do not know yet. The continental strategy for AI is out there. I'm talking about democratization, but nobody knows effectively how this is going to come into force in terms of practical provisions. And that is why all of us have a role to play in this. We need to think about what should work best for Africa and provide solid scientific evidence for them to make these regulations or develop policies for AI. But apart from that, and that is why the decoloniality impact assessment is something that I believe will work towards helping policymakers in Africa to understand the role they need to play in terms of decolonizing AI innovation ecosystem without extrapolating everything from the global north.
Okay, thank you. I think you brought about a very important topic that we might speak of AI governance, but it does not always necessarily translate into how regulation should be carried out. And in light of that, I have one final question before we go to the participants' question. And I would like to combine what each of you has said, and you can briefly answer this question. So you have brought about the fact that we are still lagging in regulation. Dr. Edmund raised a philosophical question and asked, should AI replace therapists in sub-Saharan African mental health spaces? And then Valentine raised another question and she said, how do we build trust in AI systems that use sensitive health data? So if I was to combine all these inputs together, my question to each of you is there a point at which the efficiency gains of AI in mental health become a form of abandonment for the patient? Yes. So maybe we can have Valentine answer the question first, then Dr. Edmund, and finally Dr. Eke, and then we can move on to the participants' questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Crystal. So first, before I answer that about the self-abandonment, I would just like to highlight trust in these systems is about transparency and accountability. Does the patient understand how their data is being collected when they go to the health facility, to the dispensary? Do they understand how it is being used? And who benefits from it? We know this whole thing about data sovereignty. So how is our data being used? It could be collected here, but being used to develop other AI systems, but does this benefit trickle down to us? So that is the whole thing about trust, transparency and accountability. And I believe we are growing in that, but we still have quite a long way to go, especially in light of trying to achieve UHC and all these things. So those are my thoughts, especially about building trust in AI systems. And now about the abandonment, I think it I would say it's I would take a middle point over there. So if we depend too much on these AI systems, especially in light of topic of mental health, it could bring some kind of dependency for the patient. Is it something that we want to build? That if I'm feeling down, do I then just go to the chatbot? Sort of it's eroding the society, that community. I need to talk to people. So if then we overemphasize this new developments in health tech and AI, are we then saying that community and talking to people is no longer important? But then on the other side, there are very diverse statistics on availability of mental health practitioners. So people in the remote areas in most countries in Africa can't access even a counselor. So, and perhaps then they have phone that can access this chatbot, then that becomes a need. They can actually download their thoughts over there and get some kind of relief. So it's a double-edged sword. I would say it needs control. We need not to erase the communal nature of talking and even perhaps solving your problems through a simple conversation. But then in areas where accessibility is not there, this could come in need, could come in being very useful, but a guardrail is needed so that there's not over dependency and even the misinformation that we know the AI systems can bring. So I would take that stand. That one.
Thank you. Let's have Dr. Eke now. I think we seem to have some technical issues with Dr. Edmund, but let's proceed.
Okay, so I wonder if what I'm going to say answers your question, but I will try. Because now we're talking about mental health, we're talking about human flourishing, which is also connected to mental health, and we're also talking about AI. If we are concerned about AI and we're concerned about neurotechnology that will also be related to mental health, these are two critical technologies that actually present several risks to African population. And the combination of AI and neurotechnology presents, for me, serious risk to African population because the risk intensifies because these are technologies that are very malleable. And one of those risks is that AI models trained on non-African populations, because maybe a few people here know or they don't know. I'm also the director and founder of African Brain Data Network. And this is a network of stakeholders and researchers in Africa promoting fair principles that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable brain data sets for innovation in Africa. So because we do not collect enough structured data sets that can actually define or shape AI systems, we are at the mercy of using openly available data sets in the global north to create these models, right? And these innovations, including neurotechnology. And AI models trained on non-African population may surely misread neural patterns due to genetic or environmental or cultural or linguistic differences, and also misclassify mental states, attention, stress, depression, and this is especially critical in mental health diagnostics, cognitive assessments in education, for example, or maybe neurological disorder detection and things like that. So it is important for us not just to regulate AI, but also to understand our role in providing the critical infrastructure for AI, especially data. And Edmund was right earlier on when he was mentioning our language. If it doesn't speak our language, if it doesn't speak our cultural realities in terms of the calling, right? The traditional healers calling it will not reflect our realities. So, but we do not have sufficient data to actually train AI models at the moment. So we also have a role to play in terms of curating these data sets, collecting and curating these data sets in such a way that it can help to produce or design or develop AI systems that can work for us. And that way we can have sufficient scientific evidence to actually regulate it in Africa.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. I don't know if this is also going to answer your question, but um, in terms of all of this talk, I've just been thinking a little bit about the issue of trying to make sense of the issue of language and the issue of human flourishing and sense making or meaning making. I think it's like one of the philosophers like Wittgenstein would say something like language is actually, it's not a dynamics, something that is static. It comes from or it stems from human activities. It stems from the kind of relationship that is built within a space, the activities that play around a space. That is how language is being constructed. And then another philosopher, Rico, would say something like, meaning is actually narrative, such that I think Paul Rico would say meaning is narrative, such that meaning is not static. It is the narrative that we create within spaces and the stories that we tell about ourselves within certain spaces. Now, and if we combine the concept of language, at least from the Wittgensteinian perspective and the recurrent perspective, then we understand what human flourishing mean, at least within the age of AI. What does human flourishing mean within the sub-Saharan African space? What does it mean for a person to have mental well-being? If you dig deep into African philosophy, you will realize that it is the community that we build. It is the connection that we have. And so BT, the Kenyan theologian, would say, I am because you are. And since you are, I am, such that my existence is defined by the existence of the other. But that very notion of existence, which is the relational concept of existence, is that which has now been threatened by the proliferation of digital technology. So, for instance, if you there's a recent dynamic that has been happening within Japan, and which is a global. It depends on how you want to define global south, but which is also technically a global south country, where people are moving away from human relationships. So there is this thing that is going on there about 3,600 people and something they call human recluse, such that they don't want to have human engagement anymore. And almost about close to 1,000 people are now getting married to digital technologies and all of that. I believe that the obstruction of this narrative of us, this dynamics of us, this relational notion of existence of us is that which is threatened. And it is also then creating some form of, it's not scientifically proven, but I'm apt to think that it is then creating this distance that we have between each other as human person, therefore creating stress, anxiety, and these are all mental health issues. And I believe that I think there was a panel that was talking about the workspace, for instance, where we're now moving into digital tools, where again, it's due to market structure where people are trying to get profitability in their businesses and all of that. So to bring it back, I feel like while we're even trying to govern AI, we're trying to account for principles that should govern AI, regulations that should govern AI, how it ought to be ethical, how it ought to respect rights, how it ought to respect privacy. I don't even know how we define those things. Our very existence in this AI ecosystem is that which is threatened if we all agree that our existence is defined by the existence of the other, when we don't even have that relational connectivity anymore. And I believe that that should be the starting point in terms of thinking about regulation. How does AI impact, or how does the digital space impact the kind of relationship and bonds which we have between each other? Because that is not particularly, but that is also a major contributor of the mental health issues that we're having. And until we are able to then deal with that, and also in line with dealing with the market structure of AI, the issue of coloniality, the issue of capitalism and surveillance and all of that, then we can then get like some kind of balanced regulations. But until then, I still believe that we're playing catch up, but at the same time, we're not really engaging with the essence of that which makes us who we are as people from the sub-Saharan African space. And again, I'm not trying to create this myth of unanimity to say that everyone in the sub-Saharan space, we are homogeneous and all of that. No, but it's just some form of geographical labeling that this is what we associate ourselves as. And this is the very aspect of us that is being threatened through digital technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for each and every one of those contributions. So now I'd like to quickly move to the questions that we have received from the attendants. And the first one, I would like to direct it to Dr. Eke because you specifically talked about differentiating between colonialism and coloniality. And so Calvin Odera has a question and he asks, how do we Africanize and redesign AI to reflect our realities? And again, is the AI design as it is broken or properly working to propagate coloniality?
So I think I answered in the chat. For the first one, in terms of redesigning AI system to reflect our realities, first of all, we need to train our own experts. We need to have our own AI expertise in Africa, use our own languages, uh, create our own data sets, embed our own values in the AI systems designed, and also target specific African problems with our AI systems. AI is still well overhyped in these days. It's still about what it learns from what the system learns from the data, right? So the effectiveness of the AI depends on what data is trained on. So we need to make sure that the data our AI systems are trained on reflect our realities. If it does, then the AI system will surely reflect our realities. But also, if we have our own expertise developing the algorithms that can reflect our realities, because the bias and discrimination is not just in the data, but also in the algorithm. So we need our own experts also to develop algorithms that will reflect our realities. And then in terms of coloniality, it's not intentional. I wouldn't say it's intentional that coloniality is embedded in these AI systems. But many AI systems reproduce coloniality as regards data, as regards labor exploitation, infrastructural dependencies. Um, People from Kenya here will be aware of the scandal of a few years ago about data labelers in Africa, where these big tech companies actually seek cheap labor in Africa to label the large data sets that shape the AI systems. That is exploitation, and that is a colonial tendency that we're talking about in terms of coloniality.
Thank you. And now I'd like to give an opportunity if there's anyone in the audience who would like to directly pose a question to any of the panelists before we wrap up this conversation.
So I'll weigh in. So in my keynote that I did yesterday, one of the things that I intentionally did was a kind of a projection into the future, what I call digital wellness Afrofuturism. I'd be very interested to hear from each of you succinctly one a kind of future vision of ideal Afrocentric AI use towards wellness.
Maybe I go first.
Sure.
So in recent years, through the work I'm doing with the African Brain Data Network, and also some of the work I do at the IBI level International Brain Initiative, there are loads of brain or maybe wellness apps or technologies being developed that are neurotechnologies, right? And that's where I'm going to answer this question from. And these consumer level products are already in use everywhere in the world, including Africa, right? And they are collecting tons and tons of data. They are retraining models with these data sets. And most of these technologies do not often work as effectively as Africans as it works for people in the global north. One example will be EEG devices. I don't know if anybody is familiar with EEG devices here. Most EEG caps do not work for Africans because of our coarse hair, right? And these EEG devices are sometimes donated to African clinical settings so that these manufacturers will collect more data to train. But then they are not dealing with the immediate misdiagnosis that will come with these technologies in the clinical setting. So having these technologies being developed with our own data sets is something that will surely improve human flourishing in Africa. Data sets, and also expertise to create these systems.
Okay, Edmund, Valentine.
Okay, thanks for that. So, my closing caption would be that in the coming days and hopefully for the next lifetime, as the AI systems are being developed in whichever sector, be it health, be it education, be it finance, that AI should be for Africa. It should need to move from AI for Africa to AI with Africa. So these things are no longer going to be done for us. We are not now importing these systems from the global north and coming trying to fix them into our reality. It's like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. So these things need feet. They need to understand uh, what we are about. We can borrow some concepts and then localize, use it to our context. So we need to move from AI for Africa and go to AI with Africa now and always. That would be my future hope. Over to you.
Yeah, we lost Edmund, so sorry about that. I think taking Calvin's question is appropriate at this time.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to find out from Dr. Edmund through his initiative of African
Okay,
Brain
Calvin,
Network.
Cal-
Yes,
Calvin,
yes.
hold on. Dr. Edmund dropped off, so we'll
Oh,
connect you
I
with
think
him.
he's talking to me.
Yes,
He's talking
it's
to
actually referring to
okay,
Dr.
okay, I'm
Eke.
sorry. Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to find out if there are any brain scans that have actually been done locally in Africa to actually determine the impact of technology on human wellness and the brain itself, so that we determine how well do we relate with technology moving forward. I also wanted to find his advice, honest one, because I see him in the chat saying that AI is overhyped. So, in a scale of 1 to 10, how does he relate? How does he relate tech impact in the African ecosystem? Is it something that he would advise into the race and manner in which it is being deployed to continue, or would he advise that we go slow and more intentionally engage and do more reevaluate our ways and means of using technology, more so in the deployment on learning and in young adult learning institutions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me take the first one first. In terms of brain scans, let me maybe point this out. Africa lacks loads of MRI scanners. We do not have sufficient MRI scanners for our clinical environment. In terms of research, to my own knowledge and understanding, we only have one research scanner in the whole of Africa, in UCT. Only one university has a research scanner in UCT in Cape Town, right? All the other MRI scans are in clinical settings, in hospitals or in diagnostic centers. So it's difficult to do research with MRI or fMRI in Africa. Now, there are initiatives from Melinda Gates and other funders who are now trying to introduce low field MRI scanners in Africa for research and also for clinical purposes. Those are cheaper, but then they're not as effective as the 3 Tesla or 6 or 7 Tesla and all that. So it's difficult in the kind of a research setting. It's difficult to do research with scans. But in terms of other neuroimaging techniques like EEG, FNIRS, there are a few things happening. There are a few things happening, especially with what we are doing also. Last year, we trained about 25 people on the use of FNIAs in workload management, right? In assessing workload management, which I think I was asking questions about that earlier on. So those are this is an emerging field where people are now trying to use neuroimaging to study to gather the scientific evidence that can help us to understand the impact of digital technologies in the workplace. I'm not aware of any current study with neuroimaging in Africa that has done that already. There may be, but I'm not aware of it. So I don't know whether it answers your question. There are efforts, but I don't think we're there yet in terms of using scanners to study what you're referring to. In terms of AI, the hype, 1 minute? Did you say 1 minute? Okay, okay. So in terms of AI hype, it's well overhyped. AI is well overhyped. If you listen to the tech bros, right? We're nearly at the cups of AGI. We're there. For them, we're there, right? We need to be scared of these AI systems because they're going to learn from each other. They're going to attack us. They're going to do a lot of stuff. We're not there yet. We're still at the level of narrow AI. And tech bros will always be tech bros. And I don't want to go into the politics of that, but it's something that we need to realize that AI can't do a lot of stuff. It can't do a lot of stuff. It still can do some narrow stuff that we want them to do, but it's not going to do a lot of stuff, right? So that we don't rely heavily on these systems. And that way, we can also save ourselves the stress and the anxiety of anticipating these automated system to do everything for us. So I don't know. We can discuss that from today to tomorrow. There are loads of philosophical arguments for it and against it. And also, Edmund, I appreciate. I'm a philosopher by training, so I appreciate the conversation happening in such a space, and we're talking about Wittgenstein and Heidegger. It's awesome. I love that.